You're listening to Benched. I'm Cassie Price.
And I'm Peyton Burrill. And today we want to talk about the parts of sports journalism that don't always make the highlight reel.
Today we're talking about imposter syndrome, that annoying little feeling that you're not really supposed to be here, even when you've earned your spot.
For a lot of people, especially women in sports media, that feeling isn't just internal. It comes from years of being questioned, overlooked, or expected to prove yourself twice as hard.
We felt it, and chances are you have too.
So, this episode is all about defining it and figuring out how we deal with it.
Let's get off the bench and talk about it.
Okay, so to start this podcast off, we want to talk about what imposter syndrome is and define it. So, the textbook definition of imposter syndrome is when female athletes doubt their abilities and feel like they don't truly deserve their success, even when they've earned it. They believe wins are from pure luck, feel like a fraud, or push themselves to be perfect just to feel worthy. Over time, it can drain confidence, increase anxiety, and hold them back from reaching their full potential. Cassie, what does that exactly mean to you?
For me, imposter syndrome just kind of seems like you're not as confident. Exactly what you said in the textbook definition. It just feels like, especially for women in sports, where typically it's a male-dominated area, you're not as confident in what you're doing, even though you know that you're trained and you have a specific spot and you've earned your spot and you've worked so hard for this moment. It's kind of just like I don't want to say ego, but
self-doubt.
Yeah, you're doubting yourself and you're not confident in your abilities. And it's not because you don't know what to do. It's just because what you are hearing from other people or hearing from the media or just being a woman in sports, even if that's playing a sport or being in sports journalism.
I definitely agree, and I think the one part of the definition that I don't think fully captures what imposter syndrome is it says it's for athletes, and I think it definitely applies to athletes. We'll even talk about that more in a bit, but I think it applies a lot to like writers and broadcasters and people who are in front of the camera, behind the camera, just any aspect of sport in general that doesn't even have to do with the athletic part itself, and it does come down to self-doubt where it's like, you do have the skill set and you might know that you do, but you're kind of told to feel a certain way, and then you look at the media and they tell you to feel a certain way as well, and it just kind of gets lost in translation, so those skills kind of feel less of an accomplishment than they actually are.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially when it comes to sports media, just because it is such a competitive field to get into, and it is really male dominated. Even like on ESPN and everything, we're finally just seeing women come around, so it's kind of just, you kind of lose confidence, you lack self-confidence, and it's kind of a hard time to be around, like pushing past that. Have you ever experienced this?
When I first heard the term imposter syndrome, I remember I was in class and someone brought it up and they asked one of our professors, like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And I didn't know what it was at the time. I'd never heard that, but I obviously knew what it was just by the way it sounds. And I was like, that is the perfect name for it. Because when you do feel like you're in an area where you just feel like the imposter, you're like, everybody knows that she doesn't know, or everybody knows that she doesn't have the answers to these questions. Even sometimes when you do, you feel like an imposter. So I feel like the definition or the name of it absolutely applies really, really well to how it feels to kind of undergo all those different emotions. I don't think I've necessarily felt it in the sense where I've been like, I'm not good enough to be here, but I've definitely had moments where I've been like, shoot, am I prepared enough? Are people going to question my ability to do this? I mean, right now, I'm a sports reporter for CTV, and when I do weekly stories on that, I put a lot of effort into them, and I'm proud of a lot of the things that I've done, but when you look at some of the other pieces that other people have produced, I sometimes have felt like, okay, did I do a good enough job? Is this success, quote unquote, air quotes for the audio, but sometimes that success can be hard to kind of find agreement with yourself in, almost. So definitely felt it, but luckily I don't feel like it's been like overwhelming and overarching factor, but I know for a lot of people it has, which we actually have a couple examples that we want to talk about. The first one is Suni Lee. Cassie, do you want to tell us a little bit about Suni Lee and her experience with imposter syndrome?
Definitely. So for anybody that doesn't know who Suni Lee is, incredible gymnast, incredible athlete. She has so much athleticism. She's such a great individual. I believe she's only 19 years old.
And has a ton of accomplishments.
She has 6 Olympic medals. So as a 19-year-old, that's kind of
crazy.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't have any Olympic medals and I'm 20.
Can't say I do either.
I think that's super awesome. But Suni Lee actually has struggled with imposter syndrome, and coming from somebody who is such a decorated athlete and has gone to the Olympics multiple times and actually has experienced imposter syndrome at the Olympics, like I applaud her for being able to get over that. And it's kind of frightening being able to see that somebody with that much athleticism also is experiencing it, but it also helps younger athletes recognize that we're all human and we all go through this. So Suni Lee, back on imposter syndrome, she started to get a lot of hate from the media, so social media and like press, and people were telling her that she did not deserve to win at the Olympics in, I believe, 2022. This was the Tokyo Olympics. Was that 2020 or 2022?
I think so. 2022.
I think so. I'm not sure. But a lot of people were telling her that she didn't deserve to win. And it kind of put into the factor of she lost confidence. And she just felt like she didn't want to do gymnastics anymore. And she hated it, even though that's what she kind of worked to get to for her whole life.
Right. I think as an athlete, that's a very scary possibility for a lot of them. I'm obviously not a professional athlete, but I think with Suni Lee's situation especially, she is so successful, like proven success. Like she's got all these medals, and beyond the medals, just a lot of really difficult skills that she's mastered and become like a professional in her field of. And to have those doubts is definitely a scary thing that I know a lot of athletes face, whether it's at the collegiate level, the professional level, whatever it may be. And I think it's funny to say, okay, this person is so successful and they're still feeling that way. So think about people who are maybe not quite as successful as her and feeling that way too, how difficult it can be to kind of come out of that headspace, because it is a mental thing. It's a mental block where you just start putting these ideas in your head, and the media, if you're like a mainstream athlete, they start telling you the same thing and reinforcing that, and it just becomes this kind of negative like loophole of self-doubt.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the media these days, media and in general, it just doesn't really help because everybody has something to say. So it's like you're constantly looking at other people's opinions and you're not really thinking about your own opinion at that point. But Suni Lee did come to social media and post about how she copes with imposter syndrome. And that, I believe, that truly helped a bunch of younger athletes as well, because some gymnasts, they look to her as like a
figure.
Yeah, like a figure. So
an influencer in a sense. Like,
yes.
She has influential presence, and like you said, her coming, we'll give you guys some examples of the media or of the ways that she's coping, but I think for someone with that much influence, especially over younger girls and people in gymnastics and any sport in general, coming out and saying like, I struggle with this and this is kind of how I cope, I think that's very powerful. And I think as a gymnast, a female gymnast, it's hard to do that because you, like we were talking about, you have an image and your image is a big part of your sport. And so when you kind of show that vulnerability and you show that like, look, I'm feeling anxious about my performance, or I'm feeling like I don't belong here, that's a very like courageous thing to say and admit, and then to show that you kind of came out of that darker area and found ways to handle it is really impressive. So let's look at some of those specifics as to what she did and kind of how she overcame that.
Okay, so Suni actually took it to Twitter and she posted a journal entry that she actually does before every meet, which I think is fantastic. I think a journal is a great way to get in a good headspace, write everything out that you're kind of thinking. In this journal, she kind of had words of encouragement to herself, like, you are beautiful, you are confident, you've got this, like, stick it, you deserve to be here, you deserve to be on the mat. And she kind of set that up for every event that she had in the meet that day, which I thought was incredible.
I think that's a really good thing too, because I forget where I heard this, but like when you write things down, you're putting them out into the world. Like even if it's just you reading them and it's just for yourself, you're putting it out there and you're putting it in paper, or you're putting it on paper, and it's more likely to come true. Like if you know that you have the skills and you write that down, I have the skills to do this, it kind of plants that seed in your own head of just being like, okay, you do have the skills. So what if it doesn't go as perfectly as you want it to, or things obviously are going to happen that get in the way with the end goal, but at the end of the day, you do deserve to be there, and writing that down I think is a great way to do that. And with that, we have a couple other people that we looked at, one of which is Alona Mar. So for those of you who don't know, Alona Mar is a rugby player. She, again, is another extremely successful person in her field, and she has a ton of accomplishments that are extremely impressive. The only difference is when she was asked about imposter syndrome, it was in an interview, she said that she's never felt it, which I think is kind of a rarity these days. That doesn't happen all the time, but I think that she saying that and going on the record being like, look, I don't even think I have that. I've never felt that. I think that is really powerful for younger people to hear, especially women, because like we said earlier, when you hear someone who is influential and has kind of this image, you start to trust that person and you kind of build like a relationship with them, even if you don't actually know them. And so for her to say that she's never felt that, she's reassuring her skills, and she knows that she's a good athlete and she knows that she's worked hard for it. And it's a positive thing for sport, I think.
Like you said, it's great for younger audiences, even audiences that are in the professional field and they do have imposter syndrome. They're like, well, if Alona Meyer doesn't have it, then why should I? Like, I deserve to be here as well.
You've worked just as hard.
Yeah. So I think that's great. So do you want to talk about the podcast?
I'm glad you brought that up. So we've talked about two different athletes who have kind of experienced imposter syndrome and then also kind of not experienced it in the sense that she's just confident in her own skills. Those are some athletes, but there is also a whole nother side of imposter syndrome, and that is in the world of journalism. So for those of you who are involved in the NFL or like watching football or anything like that, you probably know who Erin Andrews is. Erin has a podcast that she does with one of her friends, Carissa, who is also a sports journalist, and they talk about imposter syndrome at length, and they kind of go into just how to cope with it, how to deal with it, and then what are the ways around it. So in their podcast, they talk a lot about defining exactly what it is, and then that is the best way to go around it. So when you are going to approach sports journalism, or if you're ever feeling imposter syndrome, what are some of the strategies that you would personally use to kind of combat that?
Oh, definitely. So first of all, I feel like getting in that world is just a little scary, and attacking it is it's very frightening. Personally, for me, I'm more of like a hit it, head on the nail, like attack it. If you don't succeed, try and try again.
Mm-hmm.
But I might use Suni's approach. I might write everything out, because recently I've been journaling a lot, and that's been helping me get over a lot of fears and a lot of stuff that I'm afraid to do. So for me, I feel like writing stuff down, going out, going on a walk, telling myself I can do this, having positive words posted all around me, maybe like a mood board in my room or something, just telling myself I can do it, and really honing in on the skills that I have learned and know that will guide me to the proper path. I think that's one thing that I would really like to focus on. What would you focus on?
I definitely agree. I think in this situation, fear is the enemy, where if you are constantly telling yourself those negative thoughts and believing that you are the imposter, then of course you're going to fail. So positive reinforcement's a huge thing. I know I'll read you guys a quote from Erin and Carissa's podcast. Carissa says, "Remember how you got to where you are currently. What has put you in a position of success in the past. Make sure that no matter what role you're in, that you really want to be in that role. And if you really love what you do, it won't feel like a burden." So to me, that kind of means look at all of the things that you have done. So if you're an athlete, look at those gold medals that you got if you're SUNY, or if you're Alona Mar, look at all of those rugby accomplishments. But if you're a sports journalist, look at some of the pieces you've written, look at some of your shows that you've done, whatever it may be, and pick apart the things that you really liked. I think highlighting and defining the things that you're proud of are really important, because then you can incorporate them into future pieces. So for me personally with CTV, I know I've gone back and I've kind of looked at some of my on-air moments, and of course I have the occasional moment where I stutter or I slip up on a couple words, and so I try not to hold myself too aggressively to those, because those are mistakes. Those aren't the regular, and I know that I'm better than a small mistake. So I look at the things that are big that I do really like, and I try to kind of copy and paste those into future pieces, which I think I've gotten better at, and I think it's something I'm still working on, obviously, but I think it's a good place to start. And I think anybody who's kind of struggling with imposter syndrome can definitely gain a lot of valuable lessons from something of that sort.
Definitely. I'm actually glad that you brought up seeing like the negative aspects, quote unquote, negative aspects of stuttering or bumbling over your words, because it's kind of hard when you are trying to find your accomplishments and you're already feeling that kind of imposter syndrome feeling, and then you see some negative aspects of what you have done. It kind of puts you down a little bit, and it's kind of hard to see the positives and go from there. So being able to look past the negatives and look on the bright side and look on the positives, be like, yeah, that happened, but look at all these other accomplishments that I have, and look how proud I should be of myself. Like, I think that is a great aspect. Yeah.
And obviously, as a human, you're going to make mistakes. Like, you can't expect perfectionism with everything you do. That's so unrealistic, and that's just not going to, that's never going to be the case. So learning from the mistakes is really where you can grow and where you can grab the opportunity to become better and better, because as a sport journalist, like, you are working to get better and better. You're not going into it perfectly, especially us. We're college students. We're still learning the basics. We're still kind of navigating all that there is, but it just goes to show that you have a starting point. That's point A, and you're working towards point B. And when you take good steps, that's awesome. Really acknowledge those steps, but also kind of try not to dwell on all of the little mistakes and the small things that can get in the way.
Definitely, yeah. Just keep pushing, keep growing, keep learning.
So what we've learned today is that imposter syndrome doesn't disappear overnight, and that even some of the most successful people in the industry have felt it. But recognizing it is the first step to fighting back.
So whether you're in the press box, on the mic, or on the field, you do belong and deserve what you've worked for.
We've all heard fake it till you make it, and the truth is we're all just pretending to have it figured out while we're actually making it happen.
So keep showing up, even when it feels uncomfortable. You've earned your spot.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time. Until then, stay off the bench.